Chapter 1. The Cave. A samurai wandered along the quiet shoreline, his sandals leaving faint imprints in the soft sand. The rhythmic lapping of the waves against the shore was the only sound that accompanied him. However, as the sand beneath his feet gradually gave way to gravel, the sharp crunch of each step seemed to echo in the stillness, amplifying the solitude of his journey. A thick morning mist rolled in from the sea, wrapping the world in a soft, almost ethereal blanket. The sun, once visible on the horizon, was swallowed by the fog, leaving only a pale glow behind. The air felt heavy, as though the entire world had paused, holding its breath in a strange, unnerving calm. As he continued along the coast, his gaze fell upon the mouth of a cave hidden in the rocks. From within, a faint, eerie blue glow beckoned, an invitation that was impossible to ignore. Drawn by some unseen force, he stepped closer, his every movement feeling deliberate and measured. As he entered the cave, the sound of dripping water grew louder, each drop hitting the ground with an almost rhythmic precision. The cave was a labyrinth of jagged stalactites and stalagmites, their sharp forms like the teeth of some ancient sleeping beast. Each uneven surface seemed to pulse with an unspoken energy, casting long wavering shadows that twisted unnaturally in the dim light. The air was thick and damp, clinging to his skin with every step, the scent of earth and decay mingling in the silence. The deeper he ventured, the more the sounds of the outside world faded, leaving only the faint drip of water from the high ceilings and the soft echo of his footsteps in the dark. After navigating the winding path, he came upon a still pool nestled among the rocks. The water was as dark as obsidian, its surface unnervingly smooth, like a mirror that had not been disturbed in centuries. It reflected the jagged edges of the cave, but something within its depth stirred, a slow, almost imperceptible ripple that seemed to come from the depths of the earth itself. He leaned closer, drawn to it, as if the water was calling him. As his gaze met the reflection, something shifted. It was subtle at first, a flicker in the dark depths. And then, as if it had been waiting, the reflection revealed not just his own image, but another figure, standing impossibly close behind him. His heart quickened, the hairs on the back of his neck rising. The figure was obscured by the shadow of the cave, its features indistinguishable, but the cold, oppressive presence of it made the very air feel heavier. The stillness of the cave, once almost comforting, now seemed like a trap, a silence so complete it pressed in from all sides. Suddenly, a cold sensation gripped him, and his body froze. Though his muscles refused to move, his mind felt detached, drawn into the pool's depths, as though pulled by an invisible force. He struggled to break free, but it was as though his very essence had been consumed by the water. When his senses returned, he found himself in a strange, unfamiliar place. The surroundings were unlike any land he had ever seen before, the air thick with a sense of both mystery and danger. The samurai knew, without a doubt, that he had crossed into a realm beyond the one he had known, a place that seemed to exist on the edge of reality itself. Chapter 2. The Clearing. A natural stone pathway stretched before him, winding steadily downward as it cut through a dense forest. The trees were thick here, their trunks gnarled and twisted, and the canopy overhead was so thick that sunlight struggled to break through. The shadows were deep, and the air was heavy with the scent of earth and damp leaves. Every step he took seemed to echo in the strange quietude, creating a rhythm that felt out of place in this dense wilderness. He could hear something in the distance, a rustling, a movement, something alive in the stillness. But the sound was faint, so distant that it might have been a trick of the wind. His senses, honed through years of samurai training, told him that it was no mere animal. Something more deliberate stirred in the shadows. His heart beat slowly in his chest, controlled and steady. Discipline and meditation had taught him how to regulate his body's reactions. Fear, excitement, emotions that could cloud judgment were foreign to him now. He was calm. He would remain calm. The distant rustling grew louder as he pressed forward, his footsteps muffled against the soft earth of the path. His eyes narrowed, and he moved with caution, each stride calculated. The air felt charged now, as if something waited just out of sight. Something that by instinct he knew could not be ignored. The pathway, dark and narrow, suddenly opened up into a vast clearing. His eyes widened at the sight before him. The ground was dotted with strange, vibrant flora that he had never seen before. Plants that shimmered with an otherworldly light, as though they were alive in ways that defied nature's laws. Trees with iridescent bark rose in perfect symmetry around the edges of the clearing, and at the center, a pool of crystal clear water lay still and serene, its surface like a mirror. But what startled him most were the creatures that roamed the clearing. They were not animals in the conventional sense, they were something far more curious. The beings moved fluidly, their bodies partially transparent, glowing with soft radiant hues. They were humanoid in shape, but without any discernible faces, their forms shifting like smoke in the breeze. They seemed to be aware of his presence, but made no effort to approach him or retreat. They simply existed, as though they had always been here waiting. Were these the yokai his mother had told him about in his youth? His training told him that this was no ordinary place. His breath caught, and for the first time in years he felt a stir of something deeper, uncertainty, perhaps even awe. It was a strange thing to experience as a warrior, but in this place, it felt inevitable. One of the beings moved toward him, its movements slow and graceful. It stopped just a few feet away and extended a translucent hand. He hesitated, then raised his own in response. But before he could make contact, the being's hand passed through his without resistance, as though it were made of the very air itself. A sudden rush of energy filled him, more intense than any blade he had ever wielded. It was neither pain nor pleasure, but something beyond comprehension, something ancient and powerful. The ground beneath him seemed to tremble, and the air thickened around him. Then, in an instant, the being withdrew, vanishing back into the clearing as if it had never been there at all. This was no ordinary forest. This was no ordinary path. The samurai's pulse quickened as he stood alone in the clearing, the echoes of his heartbeat reverberating through the strange, alien landscape. What had just happened? What was this place? And more importantly, what was he meant to do next? As the wind stirred the shimmering plants and the other beings continued their gentle, flowing movements, he knew this was a moment unlike any other in his life. The world he had known was no longer the same. Chapter 3. The Reflection. As the samurai cautiously walked from the edge of the tranquil clearing, his eyes became fixed on the figure approaching in the distance. The figure moved with a deliberate calmness, each step echoing a stillness that seemed to stretch the very air. As the figure drew closer, the samurai's sharp senses caught the faintest disturbance in the wind, a subtle shift in the world around him. His hand, as if by instinct, grasped the hilt of his sword, ready to respond to any threat. The figure came into full view, and the samurai's breath caught in his chest. The stranger was tall, taller than anyone the warrior had ever encountered. His stature was imposing, yet his movements were measured, and his face bore the marks of experience. A mature complexion that spoke of many years, perhaps centuries, of life lived with purpose. The samurai, his body poised for action, felt the strange tension in the air settle into something deeper. He could not explain it, but this was no ordinary man. For a brief instant, he felt as though time had fractured. He saw versions of himself, younger, afraid, older, worn but steady, one barely recognizable, eyes full of something ancient. They stared back in silence, knowing, urgent, then gone. The stranger stopped a few paces away, just at the edge of the pool that shimmered in the moonlight, and bowed slightly. His voice was soft, yet it carried a weight that demanded attention.
I am Izanagi.
The samurai, still on edge, bowed in return, but as he straightened, he realized something was wrong. He couldn't recall his own name. The absence of it in his mind was disorienting, like a page torn from a scroll, and for a moment, he found himself lost in the silence between them. He quickly apologized, his voice filled with humility. "I beg your forgiveness," the samurai murmured, his eyes downcast, trying to regain his composure. Izanagi accepted the apology with a nod, as if he had already anticipated the confusion in the young warrior's mind. His gaze, deep and unwavering, seemed to pierce through the samurai, seeing something beyond the surface.
It is not your fault. You are a stranger here.
The words lingered in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. The samurai struggled to understand. What did Izanagi mean? A stranger where? Izanagi's voice broke through his thoughts, calm and measured.
Do you know why you are here?
The question sent a ripple of unease through the samurai. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Instead, another apology escaped him, his voice betraying his confusion. "I am sorry," he repeated, his hands now nervously fidgeting at his sides. Izanagi simply nodded, his face serene as always.
Come, sit, let us talk.
They moved to the edge of the pool, the water still and clear as glass. The samurai hesitated, then sat down cross-legged beside Izanagi. The reflection of the moon danced upon the water's surface, and the samurai found himself staring at the image of his own face. His features were sharp, defined by years of training and battle, but something about it seemed distant, as though the reflection wasn't quite his. However, it was the absence of Izanagi's reflection that caught his attention. The man's form was not mirrored in the water, as if he were not of this world at all. The samurai's brow furrowed, and a chill ran down his spine. Izanagi's voice broke the silence again.
Do you see it? My reflection does not appear in the water. This is part of your journey, part of what I will teach you.
The samurai's eyes widened, his confusion deepening.
Life and death,
Izanagi continued, his voice calm and unwavering,
are not just concepts to understand as a samurai. They are forces that shape you, who you are. This place, this moment, is a lesson in seeing beyond the surface.
The words echoed in the young warrior's mind. He had been trained to fight, to live as a blade, but never had he been taught what lay beyond the edge of his sword, life and death. The samurai wondered if he truly understood them at all. In this strange otherworldly place, the boundaries between reality and illusion began to blur. He realized, as his teachers had often told him, that here, now, nothing was as it seemed. Expect the unexpected, they had said, but nothing could have prepared him for this. Izanagi sat in perfect stillness, his gaze unyielding, as though waiting for the samurai to find his own understanding. The samurai, though still unsettled, felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. Perhaps this was not a battle to be fought with a sword. Perhaps this was a battle of the self. As the moonlight reflected off the still water, the samurai's mind began to clear. He didn't yet know why he was here, or what lessons Izanagi would teach him, but something told him that this journey was only just beginning. Chapter 4. The Land of the Dead. Izanagi broke the silence with a voice that trembled not from fear, but from the memory of sorrow.
I want to tell you about my wife,
he said, his words slow as if dredging them from the deepest part of his soul.
Her name was Izanami. After her death, I was grief-stricken.
Izanagi continued, his voice thick with emotion.
I could not bear the thought of losing her, not to the cold, dark realm of the underworld. So I sought the impossible. I undertook the task of bringing her back.
His words faltered for a moment, as though they alone could not do justice to the agony he had suffered. He clenched his fists at his sides, the memory sharp, searing through the veil of time.
It took so long. Years, perhaps centuries,
He muttered.
but I finally found her, deep in the underworld. She had become one with death, her form already showing signs of decay. And yet, she was still my Izanami. She was still the woman I loved.
Izanagi's gaze darkened as he relived the moment of his betrayal, the memory as fresh as if it had occurred moments ago.
Izanami warned me.
He said, his voice breaking as he recalled the words she had spoken, words meant to protect him.
She told me not to look at her, not to gaze upon what I would find in the dark tombs of the underworld.
He paused, his chest tight, as if the very air around him had become a suffocating cloak.
But I could not resist.
He continued.
I used my hair to create a torch, a flame that flickered weakly against the eternal dark. And there, in that moment, I looked at her, my beloved wife, her flesh rotting, maggot-filled beyond recognition. I saw what death had done to her, and my heart broke in two.
The words tasted bitter in his mouth, but the truth was undeniable. His betrayal had sealed his fate.
I fled in fear.
He admitted, his voice shaking.
I couldn't bear to see her like that, to see her so twisted and lost.
He swallowed hard.
But Izanami, she felt betrayed. I had broken our bond, and she came after me. She sent her demons, the Shikome, after me. Horrible, ravenous beasts, crawling from the depths of the underworld, seeking vengeance for what I had done.
Izanagi's eyes darkened further, a faint trace of regret and shame creeping into his gaze.
I ran and fought until I found the entrance to the underworld. It was my only hope, the only way out. But Izanami, she followed. She was relentless, and I could hear her voice, her fury in every step, calling to me from the darkness. My heart was torn between love and fear.
Izanagi stood suddenly, the weight of the memory too much to bear in such a still moment. He began to pace, his footfalls echoing like the passage of time itself.
I had no choice.
He muttered, his hands trembling.
I had to block the entrance. I rolled a great boulder across it, sealing it shut. I knew she would never forgive me, but I couldn't stay in that place any longer. I had seen too much. I had lost too much.
Izanagi's eyes became distant, as though seeing something far beyond the present.
Afterwards, I spent many days in isolation. I could not return to the world of the living, not after what I had done, not after everything that had happened. I needed to cleanse myself. I needed to purify myself of the taint of the underworld, to rid myself of the darkness that had followed me from the horrors of that place.
He fell silent for a long moment, the air thick with the weight of his words. Finally, Izanagi looked up, his gaze piercing, his expression unreadable.
The price of love,
He said quietly, his voice carrying the echoes of 1,000 broken dreams.
is often more than we can bear. But it is a price we must pay, whether we wish to or not.
Izanagi paused, his eyes softening as he looked at the samurai before him. The wind whistled through the trees, a haunting, mournful sound that seemed to echo the sorrow in his voice. Izanagi's story hung in the air, heavy with grief, betrayal, and loss. The samurai shifted uncomfortably, his sword a symbol of his unwavering discipline, resting close to where he knelt. He felt the chill creeping deeper into his bones, not from the weather, but from the weight of Izanagi's words.
You're troubled.
Izanagi said, his voice a quiet murmur, yet it carried the weight of centuries.
You wonder why I went so far to bring her back, why I defied her wishes, why I couldn't accept her death. But you see, none of us are immune to the heartache of loss.
The samurai looked up, his eyes searching Izanagi's face. His expression was one of weariness, a pain that transcended time.
Izanami was my world.
Izanagi continued, his gaze distant as if lost in the past.
When she died, a part of me died with her. We were meant to be together forever. But the world we live in, it does not allow such things. Death, inevitable and final, swept her away into the underworld, the land of the dead.
The samurai nodded, understanding the depths of Izanagi's love, even if he couldn't fully grasp it. He too had known the sting of loss, though not to the extent of Izanagi. But there was something in Izanagi's sorrow that felt different, ancient and eternal.
Izanami warned me.
Izanagi murmured.
She told me not to look at her, for if I did, I would lose her forever. But grief is a powerful force, young warrior. It blinds you to reason, drives you to actions you cannot take back. I couldn't bear the thought of never seeing her again. I was desperate to reclaim what was lost.
The samurai swallowed hard, his throat dry. The chill in the air had thickened, an almost palpable sense of foreboding that mirrored Izanagi's anguish. He wanted to ask so many questions, but there was one that burned above all others. "Why did you run, Lord Izanagi?" The samurai asked, his voice a whisper, reverent. "Why flee from your own wife? She was still your wife, wasn't she?" Izanagi's eyes darkened, and for a moment the weight of his regret seemed to pull the light from the surrounding world. He looked down, as if the memories themselves were too much to bear.
"Because,"
he said, his voice now tinged with bitterness,
when I saw her rotting maggot-filled form, I realized then that the love I sought to reclaim had been lost, and with it, my own self. I fled not just from her, but from my own failings, my inability to accept what had passed. I wanted to save her, but I also wanted to save myself from the truth.
A cold wind rustled the leaves, and the samurai felt a deep, unsettling silence settle between them.
I ran because there was no way back from that moment.
Izanagi went on, his voice trembling.
She was gone, and I was never the same. The one thing that remained was my regret, my failure to honor her wishes, my failure to accept what was beyond my control.
The samurai for the first time understood the depth of his pain. It was not just about defying death. It was about facing the moment when love collided with the harsh, unrelenting truth of the world, a truth that none can escape. "And the boulder?" the samurai asked quietly, unsure if he should. "Did it seal your fate, Lord Izanagi? Did you truly cleanse yourself after that?" Izanagi smiled faintly, a tired, weary expression.
The boulder sealed the entrance, yes, but it was not just the way to the underworld that I blocked. It was the path to my own peace. After that, I knew there was no going back, no undoing the past. I had to let go of the dream of reclaiming her. I had to purify myself, not just from the land of the dead, but from the chains of my own regret.
The samurai sat in silence, the weight of Izanagi's story pressing down on him. He thought of his own journey, of the battles he had fought, and the ones yet to come. "I understand, Lord Izanagi," the samurai said quietly, though his heart was full of turmoil. "But how does one move forward after losing everything?" Izanagi's eyes glinted with a hard-earned wisdom.
You don't move forward, young warrior. You simply continue, you live. Because even when everything seems lost, there is always something left to fight for.
The samurai nodded, his mind swirling with questions and realizations. He had come to this place seeking answers, but instead, he had found something deeper, the understanding that everyone must grapple with their own grief, and that sometimes moving forward was simply about enduring the weight of what had come before. The wind shifted, warmer now, and the chilling presence that had settled over the clearing began to fade. In its place, the samurai felt a strange, quiet resolve taking root in his chest. "Thank you, Lord Izanagi," the samurai whispered, "for sharing your story." Izanagi nodded, his expression unreadable.
Remember, young warrior, there is no strength in fleeing from what has been lost. True strength lies in accepting what we cannot change, and in the courage to keep walking, no matter the weight of the past.
Chapter 5. The Purification Ceremony. Izanagi continued.
After spending so much time in the underworld, I needed to cleanse myself with a purification ceremony. The underworld has a way of leaving its mark on you. One that wasn't just physical, but spiritual, like a weight on your soul.
The underworld's air is thick with sorrow and darkness. Each step through its shadowed landscapes is filled with echoes of lost souls, wailing and restless.
I had wandered through its forgotten ruins, its endless voids, and even its rivers of regret seeking Izanami. But now, the search was over. The consequences of my desires had been revealed, and I was no longer the person who had entered that place. As I emerged from the gates of the underworld, stepping back into the world, I could feel the energy shift. The wind, once stale with death, now held the promise of renewal. Yet, the lingering darkness that had seeped into my bones still clung to me. It was as if the underworld had branded me, marking me with the burden of its secrets. The pull of the underworld, its whispers, were still with me like a phantom tugging at my thoughts. I made my way to a sacred shrine, nestled deep within the forest, where the spirits of nature could witness and aid in my purification. The air there felt different, alive with the rhythm of nature, yet calm and serene, as though the earth itself recognized the need for my healing. Hayakashikone, draped in white robes embroidered with signs of water, a symbol of life, of purification and hope, awaited me by the ceremonial pool. The water shimmered with a faint glow, reflecting the moonlight in delicate ripples. Hayakashikone motioned for me to kneel beside the pool, her eyes filled with quiet understanding. The underworld's grasp is strong, but the living world is stronger. Let go, and let the cleansing begin.
The ritual started with soft chants, Ayakashikone's voice weaving through the air like a gentle wind.
She placed sacred herbs in the water, their scent filling my lungs and drawing out the weight I carried. Slowly, she began to draw symbols in the air with her fingers, each movement precise, each line drawn with intention. The ceremony was not just physical. It was a process of untangling the threads of my soul, unraveling the dark knots that the underworld had left behind. As the night deepened, I felt something shift within me. It was subtle at first, an unfamiliar lightness in my chest, as if something heavy was being lifted from my spirit. The moon above seemed to shine brighter, its glow reflecting off the water and surrounding me in a halo of purity. The whispers from the underworld that had once echoed in my mind grew faint, as if they were being swallowed by the ceremony's power. By the time the ritual reached its end, I felt transformed. The exhaustion, the weariness that had weighed on me since my time in the underworld had dissipated. It was as though I had shed an old skin, leaving behind the remnants of darkness and stepping into something new.
Ayakashikone, her voice calm but powerful, spoke one final blessing.
The veil between worlds is thin, but you have returned to the light. Walk forward with a soul reborn.
I stood, my body now feeling lighter, my mind clearer and my spirit more aligned with the world around me. The underworld had left its mark, but it no longer had a hold on me. I was no longer a traveler lost between worlds. I was whole again. And as I made my way back to the world I had once known, I understood the power of the purification ceremony, not just as a cleansing of the body, but as a reawakening of the soul.
Chapter 6. The Cave of Shadows. The samurai still seated at the edge of the pool, gazing out at the vast horizon where the sun met the earth, his heart heavy with the weight of the conversation he had just shared with Izanagi. The wind stirred his hair as the words of Izanagi echoed in his mind.
I understand. There is much conflict in the world.
It seems difficult to be true to oneself at times. His voice was soft, yet the words held the gravity of a truth he had only begun to grasp. Izanagi stood beside him, his presence like an unspoken force, comforting yet immense. His eyes were deep, as though he carried the memories of an entire world within them.
I want to also tell you about my daughter, Amateras.
He began, his tone slow and somber.
Amateras could bring light to all she came into contact with. However, she locked herself in a rock cave due to her anger and grief towards her brother, Susanoo.
The samurai listened intently as Izanagi's voice grew softer, filled with sorrow.
Susanoo, in his mischief and rage, committed great misdeeds. He destroyed Amaterasu's rice fields, defiled her palace, and even desecrated her weaving hall by hurling a flayed horse into it. His actions pushed her into a darkness deeper than even the night itself. Angered, heartbroken, and desperate for peace, she shut herself inside a cave, plunging our world into utter darkness.
The samurai felt the chill of the story seep into his bones. He had heard of the great battles between families, of the endless cycles of life and death, but hearing it from Izanagi, who had lived it all, made it seem real, tangible.
The world became cold and barren.
Izanagi continued.
Without Amateras's light, crops failed, the people faltered. Darkness fell over the world, and the sense of loss was intense. We could not simply stand by and watch as the world withered.
Izanagi's gaze hardened as if remembering a moment from the distant past.
So we devised a plan to draw her out. We took a great sakaki tree, its 500 branches reaching to the heavens, and adorned it with magatama beads, shiny stones of divine power. We hung a mirror in its middle branches, large and polished to reflect the sun's light, and draped white and blue nikite cloth beneath it, symbols of purity and serenity.
The samurai could almost see it. The divine tree standing in front of the cave, bathed in the soft glow of starlight, the air thick with anticipation.
We created a festival, a loud commotion, singing, drumming, dancing. It was a celebration of life, of light, meant to entice Amateras's curiosity. At first,
Izanagi said, his voice growing a little lighter,
there was no sign of her, but then a faint light appeared in the cave, a hesitant flicker. Amateras, drawn by the reflection in the mirror, peeked out.
The samurai could almost hear the hum of the crowd as Amateras, unable to resist, looked into the mirror. A reflection of herself, radiant, powerful, unstoppable, beckoned her out.
She stepped forward,
his gaze never leaving the samurai's face.
And that was when Nameno Tajikara-o, full of loving strength, took her hand and pulled her from the cave. With that, the world was bathed in light once more. The cave was sealed with a straw rope, and Amateras was free.
The samurai's heart pounded in his chest as Izanagi's story sank into him. The reflection, the mirror, it was a moment of reckoning, a moment of seeing oneself and stepping out into the world again.
Darkness,
Izanagi said, his voice now calm and measured,
is never permanent. Light always returns. This is the nature of things. Conflict, anger, and sorrow are inevitable, but it is harmony, understanding, and the courage to face the truth that brings us back to the light.
The samurai stood still, absorbing Izanagi's wisdom. It was as though the story had unlocked something within him, a deep understanding of his own struggles and doubts. His path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges, but he now understood the importance of seeking balance in the world, of confronting his inner darkness and allowing the light to return. Izanagi turned, his figure almost blending with the setting sun, casting long shadows on the earth.
It is time for me to leave,
he said softly, his voice carrying a gentle finality.
You must continue your journey, and I must continue mine. This is the nature of things. Farewell, samurai. Choose your own destiny.
Before the samurai could speak, Izanagi was gone, as if the wind itself had carried him away. The world seemed quieter now, and the samurai was left standing alone, a single figure against the vastness of the land. He could feel the weight of the choice before him. It was as though the very earth had held its breath, waiting for him to decide, to face the world with courage, to walk his path, knowing that darkness would come, but that the light would always return if he had the strength to seek it. Alone, the samurai closed his eyes, feeling the wind on his face and the sun warming his skin. He was ready to choose. Chapter 7. The Path of the Forgotten. The samurai stood at the crossroads, his feet planted firmly on the dirt path beneath him, though his mind was anything but steady. The world around him stretched wide, a landscape of rolling hills, ancient trees, and distant mountains, yet all he could feel was uncertainty. His hand brushed against the hilt of his sword, an old companion that had seen much, though even it could not offer the guidance he sought. 3 pathways stretched before him, each promising a different fate, yet none felt like the right one. The most trodden path beckoned with a sense of familiarity, though it lacked the excitement of discovery that the other 2 offered. The samurai's heart told him to trust his instincts, to move forward without overthinking. And so, with a silent prayer to whatever spirits watched over him, he set foot on the well-worn path. The journey began, the rustle of leaves beneath his feet blending with the whispers of the wind. As he moved, the distant sound of running water reached his ears, a calming melody that seemed to soothe something deep inside him. He had always found comfort in the sound of rivers, their steady flow a reminder of time's endless passage, and yet also a reminder that nothing, not even the harshest of moments, could last forever. The path grew narrower as he pressed on, the trees that lined the way seeming to close in around him, their dark trunks like silent sentinels, watching his every step. There was an eerie stillness in the air, disrupted by the occasional unfamiliar distant sound. The uneasiness gave rise to a tension that made the samurai's senses sharpen. His hand rested on the grip of his sword, not out of fear but instinct. His training had taught him to be aware, to never let his guard down, no matter how safe a situation might seem. As he rounded a bend, the river finally came into view. Its gentle flow shimmered in the dappled sunlight, a welcome sight after the claustrophobic forest. The air grew fresher, the tension in his chest easing just a little. And then, to his surprise, he spotted something more, a natural hot spring nestled at the river's edge. The water steamed gently in the cool air, and the sight was enough to make him pause. The recent story of Izanagi's purification came to his mind. While this hot spring was not the sacred waters Izanagi had related in his story, there was something about it that felt deeply connected to the earth itself, to life and to nature. Without hesitation, he approached the spring. The warmth of the water called to him like a mother's embrace, and he slipped into it, allowing the heat to surround him. The pressure of his journey seemed to lift with each passing moment, his tense muscles loosening as he sank deeper into the spring's soothing depths. The water was perfect, not too hot, not too cold, just enough to ease his troubled thoughts. As he settled, his mind wandered, as it often did, to the things he could not remember. The teachings of Izanagi had stayed with him, but there was one thing that continued to elude him: his name. The one thing he should have known, the one piece of his identity that should have been his own, was lost. The more he tried to grasp it, the further it slipped from his mind, like a shadow fading at dawn. This realization gnawed at him, but for now he pushed it aside. There were more pressing matters. He was here in this moment, and this hot spring was a gift, a rare respite in a world that often demanded more than he could give. Without warning, a mist began to roll in from the river, its cool fingers creeping along the surface of the water. The samurai closed his eyes. He could feel the mist surrounding him, thick and cold against his skin, but the warmth of the spring held him fast. He exhaled deeply, his body floating in the stillness, allowing the sensations to wash over him. He thought he had only closed his eyes for a moment, but when he opened them again, everything had changed. The mist had thickened, swirling around him like a living thing, its cold breath biting at his skin. The landscape, once clear, was now shrouded in a haze that distorted his surroundings. He reached out, his hand searching for something to anchor him, but the water around him felt different, foreign, the sense of being watched. That quiet unease he had felt on the path returned with a vengeance. Something was wrong, but he could not tell what. His heart raced and he tried to stand, but his body felt heavier than before, as if the spring itself were holding him down. His pulse quickened, his breath shallow. He reached for his sword, but it wasn't there. His mind screamed for him to move, to escape, but his body was frozen, trapped in the mysterious grip of the mist. It was then that a voice whispered through the fog, soft and distant. The words sent a chill through him, though the warmth of the spring still clung to his skin. The voice was unfamiliar, yet oddly comforting, like an old memory resurfacing after years of silence. "Forgotten what?" he whispered back, though he was unsure why he spoke aloud. The mist thickened, swirling faster around him, and the samurai felt a sense of drowning, not in water but in confusion. His mind struggled to comprehend the words, but they seemed to hold some deeper meaning, a truth he couldn't quite grasp. The voice came again, this time not from the mist but from within it, soft, almost tender. The mist that now surrounded him was thick and impenetrable, as if the very air had shifted into something unnatural. The trees, once visible on the edge of the spring, had vanished. The river's sound was muted, distant, faint, as though it were no longer there. And then the mist parted, as suddenly as it had arrived. The river flowed before him, its waters calm and clear once more. The hot spring remained, its steam rising lazily into the air. But the samurai knew with certainty, that the path ahead of him would not be so simple. The forgotten past, the missing name, the journey, it was only just beginning. The voice, now gone, echoed in the depths of his mind, and with it, the nagging feeling that his memory, his identity, was somehow tied to the very path he walked. And so, with a final lingering glance at the hot spring, the samurai rose from the water. He had been given a gift, this brief moment of respite, but the true test lay ahead, and he knew that he must walk forward, even if the way was still unclear. Chapter 8. The Stone of Fate. The samurai moved with quiet resolve as he followed the river that wound its way through the valley, its current rushing with a steady rhythm. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of earth and water, but a hint of salt hung on the breeze as he drew closer to the sea. His sword, though sheathed, weighed heavily on his side, a reminder of the duty he carried with each step. His journey had been long, the path clear at first, but as the river curved and split, so too did his choices. The river and the path diverged as he reached a fork. One led straight, winding gently towards an unknown destination, but the other veered into a narrow ravine, the walls on either side steep and unforgiving. His instincts screamed for him to follow the water, but the samurai's heart urged him onward, deeper into the ravine. He had no clear reason for the decision, only the nagging feeling that something awaited him in that direction. A distant beckoning sound whispered from afar, a low guttural growl that seemed to claw at the very air, its ominous presence pressing in like a dark omen. As he descended, the pathway became ever more treacherous, each step taking more effort. The jagged stone underfoot seemed to push back against his weight, as if the land itself did not want him to pass. But the samurai was nothing if not patient, and his resolve was unwavering. The sound of the ocean grew, teasing him with the promise of escape. But when he finally emerged from the ravine's curve, he was met with a great unyielding obstacle. Before him loomed a massive rock face, its surface rough but solid, blocking the way forward. The ocean lay just beyond, visible through a small crack in the stone, but the way was barred. The samurai stepped forward, his hand instinctively reaching for his sword's hilt, but there was no battle to fight here. There was only the stone. The sides of the ravine rose sharply, far too steep to climb, and as he gazed up at the smooth rock face, a sense of foreboding crept over him. The ravine's walls had always seemed unnaturally steep, but now in the face of this giant, they seemed impossibly so. A thick silence hung in the air, and the samurai frowned. He could hear the waves crashing just beyond the rock, but he couldn't reach them. Turning to go back seemed like an option, but something told him the path behind him would soon be just as treacherous. The daylight was already beginning to fade, and the thought of retracing his steps through the ravine in the dark sent a shiver through his spine. He glanced once more at the stone. Perhaps there was a way. Perhaps there was something he had missed. The crack in the rock caught his eye again. He stepped closer, pressing his face against the rough surface. He could see, just barely, the hint of the shoreline through the fissure. It was small, distant, but unmistakable. His breath quickened. There had to be a way through. He leaned in and pushed against the stone. To his surprise, it shifted, although just slightly. The samurai pushed harder, the cold rock giving under his weight. A small cascade of pebbles rattled down from above as the stone slid more, opening the crack just wide enough for him to see the ocean more clearly. Then, without warning, the ground beneath his feet began to tremble. His heart skipped a beat as the tremor grew stronger, vibrating through his legs, his bones. The feeling was familiar, an earthquake. He had experienced them before in his homeland, but never like this. The ravine was no place for safety, no shelter, no refuge. Small rocks began to fall from above, and he instinctively crouched low, looking for any sign of where the earth's fury would strike next. It was impossible to know. The earthquake rumbled louder, and the samurai knew he had only moments to act. He glanced back at the crack. The rock had moved more, opening the path just enough to slip through. But time was running out. The sound of falling rocks grew louder, and he could feel the ground beneath him shifting. There was no other choice, it had to be now. The samurai made his decision in an instant. He gathered all his strength and, with a shout, hurled his body into the stone. The force of his impact sent a shock through him, but the rock shifted, just enough. In one fluid motion, he dove through the newly created gap, tumbling into the space beyond. As he hit the ground, the earth trembled violently, and the massive stone, no longer supported, fell back into place with a deafening crash, sealing the gap behind him. He scrambled to his feet, heart racing, and without looking back, sprinted toward the distant shore. The shaking of the ground subsided as quickly as it had started, leaving an eerie stillness in its wake. He stopped at the edge of the shore, his chest heaving, the salt water crashing against the rocks before him. He had made it. But as he caught his breath, something strange stirred in the pit of his stomach. The landscape seemed familiar. The jagged coastline, the rocks that dotted the beach, it was all so strangely similar to where his journey had begun. The samurai's brow furrowed. He turned around, eyes scanning the surroundings. The ravine he had just escaped from loomed ahead, its mouth now blocked by the very rock he had moved. A sense of disquiet washed over him. He was certain he had passed through this place before, yet now everything felt out of place. His gaze fell upon the mouth of a cave hidden in the rocks. An unsettling sensation gripped him, as though the very moment he was experiencing now had unfolded before him in another time, another life. He stepped forward, but the cave entrance was now completely sealed. There was no way in. The world around him seemed unchanged, yet everything was subtly different. The sea's distant roar, the crash of waves, it all sounded so distant, as if calling him back to where he had started. But for the samurai, that journey was far from over. He turned back to face the sea, his sword gleaming at his side, and took a deep breath. The answers would come. He had no choice but to keep moving forward. For in his heart, the path was still not clear.